Welcome to the Real Life Buyer podcast. In this podcast, you will hear interviews with business owners, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, authors, and technical specialists in their field. These professionals will hasten your development, accelerate your career, and broaden your business know-how. Now, introducing your host, Dave Barr, interviewing with a purchasing twist.
Hello, and welcome to the Real Life Buyer. Mike Acker is the founder and CEO of Advanced Coaching and Consulting. He is a celebrated speaker coach at TEDxSeattle with over 20 years experience of public speaking and has spoken to huge audiences of 10,000 people. Furthermore, Mike is a prolific author of no less than 10 books, including the Amazon best-selling Speak with No Fear, which has also been listed in the Forbes 7 books that will help you conquer the fear of public speaking. What may surprise you, though, is that Mike also has quite a unique heritage, as he grew up as a son to drug smugglers who turned missionaries. In today's conversation, I want to walk through the many achievements Mike has amassed, so hopefully we're able to reflect and apply some of his success tips, behaviours, knowledge and experiences he hopefully shares today. So without further ado, I welcome Mike onto the podcast. Hi, Mike.
Hey, thank you so much, Dave. Looking forward to talking with you and giving something of value to all of your listeners here. Some entertainment, some lessons, some tips that they can walk away with.
Fantastic. Really looking forward to this, particularly as you've written so many books, so you have an incredible knowledge bank to draw upon. So let's start with your CV. I've walked through your LinkedIn profile and I've been stalking you for a little while now, and I can see you've obviously held a number of director and coaching positions before becoming self-employed, you could say. Can you walk us through kind of the highlights of your career and explain how and why you took the decision to become a professional speaker, executive and communication coach, and author?
Absolutely. So I was actually going towards law school, and then I actually left law school and went towards just a general education in college. From there, I went into pastoral ministry. So I became a minister for 18 years. I was a minister at primarily two places. One for 9 years. I was a senior minister there, oversaw a church grow from just a few people to a bunch of people. And then I did that again at another church. Then I went down and served on a staff at a large church in California where I got to speak to thousands upon thousands of people on a regular basis. From there, I took a ministry hiatus, and it was meant to just be a break. Went into consultative sales, did phenomenal, took $800,000 territory, built it into $4 million in the first year. Now, all along the way, I've been speaking at some different events, usually in ministry. And then all along the way, I was coaching people. When I switched over into that corporate sales role, I was writing my book, published it, it launched, and it grew. And all of a sudden, not only was I in the ministry world, but I was looking to be in this whole world of business speaking. And I put myself out there, and it just kept on working that, building contacts and creating more books. And from there, it just kept on growing and growing and growing.
That's quite incredible. And I mentioned I've been stalking you a little bit. I'm looking through your social media, obviously, as well as your LinkedIn. And there's obviously the reference, as I alluded to at the beginning, about you growing up in Mexico, and you overcame a number of challenges, I understand. And that was particularly to learn leadership and fluency in Spanish, obviously, certainly not my native language. And then you went on to study in the US, and you scored really highly in debate nationals. So clearly you have a penchant for speaking in front of lots of people. So can you take us through a little bit of that journey and recount a few perhaps notable difficulties you experienced, and then share some of the highlights of how you overcame them? So
sometimes when we're listening to somebody talk, we just go, man, I wish I could talk like them. They're just such a natural. So they have that penchant of to speak. And I actually did not. I did not actually have that. So when I was born, I really struggled at a young age, early on in preschool, to communicate clearly. As I would speak, my words would get stuck. I couldn't say certain sounds. Found out that I had a speech impediment. I couldn't say "j." I couldn't hear the difference between shoulder and soldier, and I couldn't differentiate it in hearing or in speaking, and several other things. I ended up working with a speech therapist, thanks to my mom. I kept on telling my mom, I don't like that I can't be heard. And my mom said that I was the driving factor to go to speak with a speech therapist. So I put the work in as a kindergartner and overcame that. Eventually, I was speaking in front of people, doing science fairs, and I'd have to practice and practice to make sure that my words were clearly heard. So I had a taste for speaking in front of people and newfound confidence in speaking in front of people through opportunities my parents gave. And right when that confidence was building and I was at a good spot with these different environments where I was speaking, we moved down to Mexico. And I could not master the language. I could not learn it. My sister's picking it up. My dad picked it up super fast when he was in college. And my mom was struggling and I was struggling. And in the midst of that, I told my dad I want to go to a Mexican school like my friend Andy had. He had gone to this private school and he had really come out learning how to speak Spanish. So I said, that's what I want to do, Dad. I want to learn how to speak Spanish. So my dad put me into a public school in the heart of downtown Mexico, 1990. Now, nowadays, Mexico is really simultaneous release with American movies and just culture is just really relevant, really new. In 1990, it was very separate from the United States. And that's where I was coming from. And I get put into this inner city school where people had never met an American before. And I'm very fair skinned. I had long blonde hair, dressed like a Run DMC rapper. I liked to surf. I had buck teeth, blue eyes. I mean, I stood out and I would have to get up in front of people. The teacher would make me get up in front and everybody would just laugh at me the whole time. I'm literally just laughing at me the entire time. So in the midst of all that, I actually started developing psychosomatic fevers. So if you're listening and you're thinking, yeah, that's right, I don't like communication, I get nervous, I get you. I mean, I was so nervous that I would make myself sick. Obviously not just for speaking, there's more going on, but it was both. Now, finally, a couple of years into it, switched some different schools, started making some friends, stopped looking back at where I'd come from, started looking forward, started embracing and knowing who I was and not believing that I was just someone to be made fun of. And I started getting up in front and speaking confidently, even in a different language. I had to slow down, I had to enunciate. Now, I go back to the United States, and now I'm actually more Mexican than I am American. And in American English, you always say like blue car, and same with British English. Just in English, you say blue car. But in Spanish, you say carro azul. So you switch it, car blue. And so I'm having to come back and relearn. And really, I made so many blunders and stupid mistakes and embarrassing moments. So for me to go into debate, someone had to believe in me. This is what I always tell my clients when I'm working with them. I say to my books is, let me be the person who believes in you. If you don't believe you can get there, let me be the person who believes in you. You need to borrow the belief of somebody else that where you are is not where you have to stay. So for me to get to that spot in nationals, for me then to become a public speaker and a coach really was a story of overcoming constant and ongoing battles that were quite hard to overcome, quite hard to manage. So encouragement for everybody listening today, even if you're not a natural, doesn't mean that you can't get there.
I must empathize as well with you because, should we say, from the age that the earliest age I can remember, 3 or 4, right through till I was 16, I had a prolific stutter or stammer. So I could not get a single sentence out without stumbling over my words. And in a similar position to you, you can imagine, the kind of Mickey taking, we say, that other children take of you. So every day you felt very embarrassed by how you tried to communicate. It was difficult to do a speech, was impossible. Even reading in front of the class from a book was kind of impossible. And so I became very introverted. So I certainly empathize with that. My saving moment, the thing that helped me to overcome that was I was actually now started working as an apprentice, and a very kind gentleman that isn't with us anymore. And he was somebody who was very religious as well. I said, hey, today, all you guys, and there was 8 of us as apprentices, we were encouraged to do a 2-minute speech. And it could be on anything from a pen to whatever. Of course, I was horrified by this. I still had a very prolific stutter, but that experience made a shift. I have no idea. I can't name the moment or anything, but it made a shift. And from the time I got home, I rode on my motorbike back home, my stammer had all but gone. I have no idea why. It just had disappeared. And I was able to talk, not without a stammer per se. I've had to carry on thinking and slowing my mind down, but 80 to 90% of it suddenly disappeared. And that was a huge change for me, a huge change in my life. So there's a tremendous amount of empathy I have for how you felt and what you went through. So thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah. Let me just pause right there too. I talk a lot about identity. I recently wrote a book. It just came out. It's actually in the UK as well. And it's called Speak with Confidence. And in the book, I was just talking to somebody about it. I'm doing a big seminar for them from the book. And she said, I've read a lot of books on public speaking, but yours dove deeply into you as a speaker. And a lot of confidence can be found from really understanding who you are and being secure in who you are and knowing your strengths and your weaknesses and your successes and your failures and your values and your mission and your background and all the influence that goes into you being you. And the more that you can be you, wow, the more confidence that you can have. And then you're not a poor imitation of someone else, but you're a good version of you.
Indeed. Thank you. Yep, that's quite prolific there. Now, I've been looking at various accounts that you have. You have a tremendously popular YouTube account. I think the last time I looked to is at 30,000 followers. On Instagram, it's an incredible 85,000 and probably more by now as well. So you clearly are somebody who are recognized, you're followed by a tremendous amount of people, and that just doesn't happen by accident. So perhaps you could share how have you managed not only to get to the level that you have, but being able to convey into a considerable social media audience the kind of confidence, the belief from other people that you're sharing things that are extremely valuable. How did you get that kind of following? What did you have to do? What were the triggers that made people, do you think, follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started with nothing, absolutely nothing. So I was in the ministry world, completely different world than what I'm doing now, what I'm speaking in. Of course, I learned some incredible skills there. I learned a lot about myself there, so I was able to bring that in. However, it didn't lend itself to this world that I was building. So when I wrote my first book and published it in 2019, and just self-published book, I really had no following, no anything. I mean, I have some people left over from ministry world here and there, but not much. And then I released that book and I went all out. So I spent a ton of money on ads at first. I was running my coaching business separate from my livelihood business. And I wasn't really even aware how much I was making back then. It was just kind of on the side. And so anything I made, I just put back into the book. And so Amazon ads, and started building email lists, had 0 email followers, and started building an email list, started these different accounts, started pushing it out there, ran ads for Instagram, ran ads for Facebook, ran ads for not LinkedIn, but ran ads on Google for my YouTube, started YouTube. And then right now I'm actually on a hiatus from publishing new content on YouTube. So you can actually see my subscribers have been dropping, and I'm like, I better do something. I was weekly. And what I would do is I was doing weekly content or daily content in some of my social media handles. I was doing engagement again and again. And then I was paying ads to drive people there, and then they would share. And then right now I'm not doing any ads on any of those. I haven't been for a while. But I was also doing a lot of social media interviews or podcast interviews like this right here. So as you're listening to Dave Barr, follow Mike Acker, ACKERDOT.com. And I would do shout outs like that. And I did shout outs like that again and again. All my social media handles are in my books. And so I just worked it. So I would say this, I came down to, I spent money to drive traffic there. I developed content and kept putting it out there. I tried a little bit of everything. I have cards that have my social media handles on. I promoted it. And then I just showed up on a ton of different podcasts. And here was my goal. Every day I start with a prayer, God help me help people today. So my goal here of being on Dave's podcast is to help you. And here's what I found. As people felt like it was helpful, more people were drawn to it and more people would follow.
That's really useful. So a lot of people are desperately trying to find people to follow them and increase their presence, hopefully give value for what they offer. It's not all about dancing and wearing funny things, should we say? But, you've put an awful lot of effort. I know what it takes just to, I did a series of 100 negotiation tips, and I know the amount of time it takes to create those, record those, and obviously share those. So you were doing something, incredibly difficult, and you're giving a lot of value to people, and that just doesn't happen. It takes work and consistency and repeatability. So I think that's the things that we have to get across to people. It doesn't fall in your lap. Basically, you've got to work for it.
Yep, absolutely. It really does. It takes work.
Now, one of the inspiring speeches I've watched of yours, I found it very interesting, and you had it on the topic of the importance of leadership to engaging in questions in order to inspire the team. I really appreciate you sharing your learnings on that subject. If you explain to people what that means, engaging in questions to inspire the team.
Yeah, see, a lot of times what we do is when we're talking to our team, we tell them what to do. They come in, they say, hey, boss, hey, supervisor, hey, colleague. Maybe you're not a boss, you're just someone that they look up to. And hey, what should I do? Here's the situation. What should I do? And so we're in the middle of something, right? And we have other things going on. We have tasks that are assigned to us. So we do what's simple, and we do what we would do. We tell them, this is the actions. And so we're telling them what we would do. Hey, if I were in this situation, here's what I would do. Go do that. It'll probably work for you. But what happens when we do that is that we become the dictator. They become the commoner. We become the rule enforcer, and they become the rule follower. We become the boss. They become the employee in that moment. And as soon as we say it, sometimes their mind goes, okay, well, we'll see. And sometimes their mind goes, well, that's not going to work. And sometimes their mind goes, well, that's not going to work, but I'm going to reject it, or I'm going to follow it. And sometimes they just go, yeah, that's going to work 100%. Now think about that. If they go thinking it's going to work 100%, and if it doesn't work 100%, then they look at you going, well, it's your fault. You didn't fix my problem. Or they say, it's not going to work. And then they have a self-fulfilling prophecy. Or they say, well, this is your idea. And then the credit goes to you. Well, the boss told me to do it. So there's not a lot of growth when we are answer tellers, but we do it because it's easy. It's less time consuming. It's because we are occupied. But if we ask questions, and just in this situation right here, we say, well, I have my thoughts, but what do you think you should do? And why do you think you should do it? What do you think the outcomes will be? Why don't you go ahead and do that? When we ask questions, they become partners. So there's not this different level of hierarchy. There's this partnership. There's this cooperation. There's this aspect of inviting them in to be the problem solver. Now, maybe it's easier, and they might go and do what they thought they would do, and it might not work. Well, then they learned a really valuable lesson. And they come in and say, well, it didn't work. And you say, what didn't work about it? Well, this, and this, and I thought I could do this. And they go, okay, well, what do you think you should do differently? How do you think you should go about it? And so it takes more time. We often know when I've done this approach and people ask me questions, we often know that the answer they come up with is not going to work because we've been there, but we provide support for them to figure it out. And as a result of that, they take on a lot more responsibility. So I have a 7-year-old son, and sometimes my son comes up and asks a question. I go, what do you think? And he answers, and I'll think, okay, why don't you go try it? And he's in a supportive area, so it's not going to be the end of the world. If he says, Dad, what should I do to make more money? I say, well, you know what? You should stand in the middle of the road, flag down cars, and ask him for money. I mean, or if he came up with that idea, I would say, no, don't do that because you're going to hurt yourself. But if he said, I'm going to create a lemonade stand, cool. We don't live on a very trafficked road, but cool, try it out. In fact, he actually had an idea one time where he was like, I'm going to sell bubble gum. I'm like, great, go try it out. and he comes back, he's like, I made 10 cents. And he was all excited about it. So I was like, oh, okay, good. I'm so glad I didn't tell. And so, well, what did you like about that? What did you learn about that? Do you think you could have made more money doing something else? And so asking the question invites them into growth. And if you want long-term employees, if you want long-term partners that increase in value received, increase in value given, then ask questions.
It's really good. As you say, it's kind of the engagement that you get from people. They feel part of the solution. They feel that their opinion is valued. They feel perhaps more self-esteem as a response to that. They feel encouragement by the fact that they are being included in the discussions. As you say, if you instruct people, well, anybody can instruct somebody to do something, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, but they're only carrying out an order. But they don't feel part of the solution anyway. They don't take any ownership, as you say. They don't take any responsibility, because it's always going to be somebody else's problem if it goes wrong, I guess. And as you rightly said, you also learn from those experiences far more than you would do if you were just taking an order and doing something on an instruction.
Right. There's a great paradigm for this in parenting, and it's the 4 C's of parenting. So you have command. And in the beginning of parenting, we're all command. Don't do that. Don't put that in your mouth. Don't stick your finger in the socket. No, no, no. We say no so often that it becomes our favorite word. And then a wise parent starts moving into coach. Well, what do you think about that? Do you think that will work? What do you think went wrong with that whole method I was just telling you? And so we're walking alongside them. Now, we're still the coach, so we still have ultimate say. No, I don't want you to sell bubblegum on the street. We still have that final say in their life. And then as we get older and they become teenagers, we move into more of a counselor. So we're still their background. And of course, we're still parents. We still have ultimate say, but they go do some stuff and we're there and they know that they're in a supportive environment. So they date that person that we weren't excited about. They were not an awful person, but we're not excited about them. And when their heart is broken, we are counseling them, or maybe they're making some bad choices with their friends and we're steering them away from them. And they're not horrible, going to jail type decisions. They're just not making some great decisions and maybe some homework or something. So we're counseling them. Well, okay, how do you feel about that decision you made? And then once they move out, my dad doesn't command me. And he doesn't even necessarily coach me. Well, what do you think in that regards? He's not counseling me, but he's a consultant. So, Dad, here's what I'm thinking about with my business. I'm thinking about doing this. I know you've run some businesses. What are some of your experiences? And my dad's an attorney and he runs his own practice. Well, what I've seen is this and this. And so he consults me and I'm able then to take whatever is applicable to me and put it into action.
Yeah, it gives people a chance to reflect on some of their decisions, on their experiences, and should we say, take that inside before you bring it back outside when you explain how you feel about it. So I think there's some huge value in that.
Absolutely.
Another fascinating insight I've seen you talk about, and I really love this, where you mention that KPIs give direction in the what, but not the purpose. And what is needed by people is the why, communicated through vision. Love that phrase, and I wrote it down and I want to talk to you about that. So can you take us through your thinking here and explain how the vision will enhance the ability of people perhaps to achieve and exceed their performance targets?
Yeah. So this actually came from a parallel from my communication teaching. The second book I ever wrote was called Right to Speak. And I talk about the 3 questions that you need to ask when you're preparing a speech in order so that you can speak with confidence. And the first one is, why are you doing the speech? So are you doing this so that people like you? That can be very convincing. It's not going to be very powerful. It's not going to be very purposeful. You're always going to have a little insecurity because what if it looks like they don't like me? Are you doing this just because you have to? Then your heart's not going to be in it. But are you doing it because you believe in the world, that this changes the world or that this helps the listeners? So if I'm going into my update with my boss and I'm like, I just got to do this. All right, so this is what's happening, the blah, blah, blah. Not very powerful and not very confident. But if I go in there, like, hey, my boss needs this in order to make a good decision, or my team needs this to know where a different part of the team is working on so they can know what to work on. So if we have a reason for what we're saying that helps people, like I believe that if I can help you raise your communication and your leadership in your life, that you can break through a barrier to your next step. So that's the belief that I bring in. That's my why. And so it brings more conviction to me, and it brings less, what do they think about me mentality. It brings more, how can I help them? So my why empowers my communication. I also write about this and speak with confidence about these questions. The what then gives clarity of focus. So if you say, Mike, come talk to me about leadership, I'm like, well, leadership is this, leadership is that. And I'm all over the place. People walk out going, I don't know what I was supposed to learn. But if I say, okay, leadership, let's talk about personal leadership, that before we lead others, we need to lead ourselves. Now you go, okay, I get it. And I unpack some of those elements, and you walk away with an element of working on your personal leadership so that you can then lead others. And you walk away, go, so that clarity of thought, instead of having 50 different points in a speech, I have one point. That brings confidence, brings power. So in speaking, your why brings conviction, brings power, brings purpose, brings confidence. Your what brings clarity, focus. So I was thinking about this in terms of business. And businesses, really, really good businesses, will focus on KPIs. They'll say, okay, here's the key performance indicators. We know what you're doing. If you're doing these things, we know that you're on the right track. And I've been in those businesses. I've had KPIs. This is what you have to do. We know your success if you hit these numbers. But sometimes a business world can lack the vision behind it. Okay, we want you to hit these numbers. There's focus there. Why are we hitting these numbers? Oh, because someone came up with a goal just willy-nilly, and now we're doing all this for that. But if you say these numbers, and this is why, and this is the heart behind it, and this is what we're trying to do, and now these specific actions are going to help us accomplish the vision, then it's like, okay, I can get behind that. So we need a why and what in communication, and we need a why and what in leadership.
Yeah, that's really good. And you say the vision, it gives people something to aim for and the purpose behind it. So particularly if it's a stretching goal, but you can see there's huge benefits to this, not only for perhaps the business, but also for the customer and other people, then perhaps you take more ownership again, and you've got more conviction in trying to achieve those than just that you're giving another stretching goal that you have to achieve. It's 2% better than last year because that was the objective last time. So people keep pushing. Yeah, absolutely.
And vision leaks. So we go out there, and what companies often do and organizations often do is like, here's our vision. We're going to change the world by this. We're going to make the world better by having better widgets. We're going to change the marketplace and the way that people organize their information, and we're going to make it more safe for them, and they're going to feel better about that and be able to do something elsewhere. Got it. That's great. Fantastic. And then you move on and you forget about it. So I've been in that type of organization where it's like, here's what we're doing. We're doing this. This is our big, huge goal. This is our vision. And then the KPIs are like, okay, go do this. And then you're doing the KPIs, and you're doing the KPIs, and the KPIs are all that's talked about, and the KPIs are all that's reinforced. And so pretty soon you're like, okay, I know what I'm doing, but why am I doing this? And so as leaders, we need to keep that vision in front. And we don't do that in speeches. We're not like, remember why I'm talking to you. I'm here to help you out. I want to make you level up. But we should do it in the organizational lifespan of our business.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. Now, you're talking about speaking to large audiences, something I'm in awe of. It's not just speaking, though, it's engaging and captivating them. And I see that as an incredible skill. So for somebody who's done this time and time again, can you share what you say are the key ingredients, the behaviours, the practices that are needed to help you connect with and kind of wow your audiences, whilst I guess you're also subduing your own fears in the process?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's several different factors. And I always break it down ultimately into 3 categories. And so this is what the book Speak with Confidence is all about. I talk about your identity is one source, your messaging is another source, and the third source is your skills. So you want to know your identity, you want to be firm on that, and let me give you something right there to do. And then your messaging, you want to know the why and the what. So you want to have the purpose and clarity of focus on what you're saying. And then skills, you want to skillfully deliver it, and you always want to be improving some skills. So let me dive into that identity piece for just a moment right there. And this is actually from my first book, Speak with No Fear, where I talk about an identity killer. And one of the identity killers that we have, identity confidence killers that we have, is where we think about ourselves a whole bunch. So I was telling you beforehand that my best friend growing up now lives in the UK. And he and I went several ways in high school. He went to the UK. I stayed in Mexico. So he had to learn how to speak English all the time, and the other way around. And he was one of those guys who would lightheartedly joke around with me at times. And so I got to lightheartedly joke around with him at times. And now English is what he speaks all the time. So if you're listening, Richard, remember this right here. So when we were in middle school, we would realize that the 15-year-old birthday parties living in Mexico, where we were, would have these big, huge bashes. And the big question that girls had is anybody going to dance with me? So what you would do in Mexico is, if you're 15 years old, you would have this big, huge thing, 100 people, 200 people, sometimes 400 people at this big, huge party that your parents are throwing. Everyone gathers around, and the father dances with his daughter. And then the grandfather dances, and then the uncles, and then the brother. And then finally, once the family finishes, the DJ says these scary words. And now we're going to open it up to anyone who would like to dance with the quinceañera. And it's about 4 minutes left, 5 minutes, maybe even 6. And so the quinceañera is so worried, will anybody dance with me? Does anybody like me, essentially? Will anybody? And of course, all the kids are in their 8th, 9th grade, 10th grade, maybe. They're going, I don't want to get out there. What will they think of me? So there's this huge divide, right? Where she's wondering, what will people think about me? Will they dance with me? And they're going, what will people think about me? And pretty soon my buddy and I realized that no one's thinking about us because they're too busy thinking about themselves. And if you can overcome that discomfort of stepping out of your safe zone, that you can then help somebody else. So we would start going to dance with these quinceañeras. And you know what? We started getting invited to 15-year-old birthday parties, quinceañeras, that we didn't even know them. I remember we got invited to one. They're like, hey, will you guys come to my quinceañera? Because I know you'll dance with me. And here's what I realized looking back at that. What we accomplished was getting out of the mindset of what will people think about me. And in speaking, one of the identity killers we have is we go up and go, okay, I'm showing up on this podcast with Dave, and he's in the UK. He has listeners all over the place, but will they like me? Do they know who I am? Do they think my style? What do they think about my gray hair? I got a Band-Aid on my finger. What will they think about that? Is that distracting? And we get in our mind. And so when we do that, we're like, well, it's not that big. And we kind of hide in. Our body gets small. We look down. But if we go, it's not about me. Nobody turned into your podcast today with the idea of, you know what? I'm going to listen to the podcast just to make Mike feel better about himself. No. Everybody tuned into your podcast because they want something of value. They want something to listen to. So in other words, it's not about me to speak right now. It's about you. And if I can help you, here's what's interesting. You'll actually like me. And so when it comes to speaking to large groups, one of the things that you can do is remember, when it comes down to that identity piece of sources of confidence, even though you need to know your identity, it's not so that you can be liked. It's so that you can be confident in who you are to serve and make it about the people you're serving versus hoping they'll like you. Now, there's obviously a lot more to that, but 2 things that you can do, but that is one that I'll give right here.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful reflection. That. Just curious now you've been speaking for a fair amount of years. Now let's find out the human side of you. What is it about speaking that perhaps you hate or fear yourself?
I think, what is it that I hate or fear the most? I think I don't really hate anything about it. If anything, I enjoy the newness of it and the connection. I think there are some moments where I hope I don't say something really dumb. And there's still some of those speaking wounds, as I call them, where I've said something dumb before. And so I'm hoping that I don't stick my foot in my mouth into one of the spots where you just get really embarrassed. You're just like, oh, I can't believe it. I remember I was preaching one time. And so I'm preaching to this group of people. It wasn't huge, maybe 50 people or something. And I said, well, let's look at this. Let's look at this story. Jesus is talking with a woman who was very loose. She may have been a prostitute. And let's pause for a moment and look at this this interaction that Jesus has, this conversation that he has with this prostitute, which is interesting because I don't usually think a prostitute has anything to teach me. And then I paused and I was like, wait a minute. I was like 26, I'm single, I'm not sexually active. And here I just told a group of people that a prostitute didn't have anything to teach me. And I thought, oh, that was weird. And of course I paused, and in that moment, I lost it and I couldn't live that down. And I did several of those embarrassing stories. Now, thankfully, nothing that was monumentally bad, but there's still been embarrassing stories even as I moved into business world communication and such.
Yeah, because certainly it's very easy for people when they make a mistake to go away from that session and reflect on it over and over and over again. It can wear people down. It can give them sleepless nights, where the gravity, the depth of the problem is, if anything, is exacerbated by the fact they're mulling it over and over. Is that something you've ever suffered with? If there's a way of overcoming that, the self-infliction of the pain and repeating the pain over and over again?
Yeah, I've 100% done that. 100%. There's a couple things that you can do to get over that. Is you can go talk to somebody who's there, because what you're doing in that moment is you're actually playing with a hypothetical. So I did this. What did people think? How did it come across? I bet everybody thought I was ridiculous. I bet that everybody thinks so little of me. So if you can get some really good feedback and say, I spoke this and I'm so sorry it came across rude. I'm so sorry it came across bad. I'm so sorry that I embarrassed myself. And they go, oh yeah. You mean when you tripped and fell? Or you mean when you didn't have your zipper up? Or you mean when you got stuck in your notes and you kind of all turned all red? Yeah, I noticed that. It wasn't that big of a deal. And all of a sudden you'll see people say, and go around, think about the most embarrassing moments. Most often they'll say something like, oh yeah, you were nervous. Yeah, okay, yeah, you were nervous. And it really wasn't that big of a deal. So you, in your mind, you're thinking this is huge and people can't stop thinking about it and you're going to be a YouTube phenomenon. And most people, most of the time, are just going, yeah, he tripped. Yeah, that was funny. His fly down. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. But you know what? Most people aren't like, oh, I'm going to hold this over. I mean, most people are not malicious. Most people aren't going out there to troll you and to do something. So one, get the right perspective, because when it happens to you, it feels a lot bigger than to everybody else. So one key aspect of that. The second one is sit down and really evaluate it as a third person. So I have my clients, we do recorded Zoom calls. I was like, go back and listen to yourself. Go back and listen to yourself. And they'll say, yeah, I hate listening to myself. And I say, yeah, but you need to do that as a third person. Observe yourself and pick it apart, the good and the bad. Because often what we do is we focus on the bad. I spoke for 30 minutes, but there's this one moment where I did this. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that I did that one thing. And we can ruin entire months of our life by just thinking about the one bad thing that happened in a month. And we can ruin an entire speech, an entire career by just thinking about the 5 bad things we did. So get right perspective from someone else and then sit down and evaluate as a third person what you did right. And sure, some things that you could improve.
Brilliant. That's really good advice. I love that. And, as you say, asking other people, because as you say, a lot of people don't notice half the time. You explode it in your own mind of what a terrible event it was. But most people just, as you say, kind of didn't realize it really happened sometimes. But for you, it's huge.
Yeah.
Now, before I ask my last question, now people are obviously going to be studying your books, no doubt, out of this. Where's the best place they can go and find out a bit more about your content? What should they be looking for when they do their searches at different social media?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to Mike Acker, that's ACKER.com. You can find most of my content there. You go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, other major bookstores, and you can get my book there. We were in New York City, and I went into Barnes & Noble on Fifth Avenue, picked my book up. So that was a fun adventure right there. And you can just pick it up at a lot of stores. And really, when I think about the different ones that are very valuable, I would start with Speak with Confidence. It's really the framework of everything I do. It's the newest one, so there's the least amount of reviews and all that kind of stuff out there. but it's huge and it's picking up momentum. And I believe it's going to be really helpful to a lot of people.
Brilliant. I believe you're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, obviously LinkedIn, and as we mentioned earlier on, YouTube. So people should go and check out all those different medias. So as we're finishing on the books, and I'm amazed that in such a short period of time, you've written so many incredible books. Now, there's a number of people, including myself, who are encouraged or wishing to become an author of some sort. You know, a lot of people have that on their bucket list. So can you share with us how you managed to, so we say, cut your teeth on your first book, and what key lessons you've learned to make the process more efficient and satisfying as time's gone on?
Absolutely. So I actually do that whole, why am I doing it? And who am I writing it for? And then what am I really trying to say? Then I'll throw out all my ideas on a Google document about it. And then I'll kind of shift them up, sift them into categories. And then once I kind of have them into categories, those become my chapters. Once I have that mind map, once I have that, here's the big thing. The biggest thing I learned was every day, write for a period of time, decide 45 days, 10 days, 20 days. Every day, write, try to write 1,000 words per day on average. And then do not edit or go back and read what you wrote as you write. That is the biggest part to me, because I wrote a book when I was 27-ish, and I would write and I would go back and edit. I'd write and go back and edit. I'd write and go back and edit. So the beginning was really good. And then as I went on, it became progressively not as good. And that process wore me out. So after I was writing for 40 days or so, or 2 months or something, however long it was, I was not wanting to keep on going. So a lot of people have a really well edited first part of a book. But if you would just write it all out and then take a little pause, celebrate your success, and then go back and read it out loud and ready as a third person to read all kinds of embarrassing parts because you're like, oh, I can't believe I said it like that. Then you'll make it through, but you have a finished draft. And once you have a finished draft, then it's all about editing. And editing is the worst part, but you're done at least. It's like, okay, I have a house. I mean, yeah, sure. You know, the carpet's not in, but I actually have a house. You can see what it is. You can see the form of it. You can see the rooms. You know, it's safe. It's got doors on it. Sure, it's not painted and it's just got sheetrock and it doesn't have carpet. But you know what? I can go in and fix that a little bit later. So get the house built and then go ahead and beautify it.
Okay, so you say it's all about the structure. You refer to the Google documents. You're scheduling, planning out each of the chapters. So did you say that is that the 10% or is that the 20%? Is it the most important thing is to build that structure before you start adding content into it?
Yeah, you definitely want a structure for it because, you know, you got to have the frames of the house up before you start doing the rest of the house, the electrical work and such. But really, even then, I would say the most important thing is writing every day without looking back. Writing every day without looking back. And definitely everything else is important, but that's the huge thing. Write every day, don't look back.
Brilliant. Well, that's been incredible having this really interesting and varied discussion with you today. I've learned an awful lot from it, and I want to thank you very much for sharing your time with me today, Mike.
Hey, thank you, Dave. Thank you so much. And to everybody listening, thank you so much for being a part of this episode of Dave's podcast. I'm glad that I was able to give something to you that would help you in your journey.
Thanks very much, Mike. You take care.
You too.
So there's another Real Life Buyer podcast. I do hope you enjoyed it and it's given you some ideas and inspiration for greater action and achievement. If you are a purchasing or a supply chain professional, business owner or director, come and join my Facebook group, the Purchasing and Supply Chain Community Hub, a safe place to engage with like-minded, friendly people. See you soon. Bye.